Chapter 3. Now when the holy city was inhabited with all peace, and the laws were kept very well because of the godliness of Onias the high priest, and his hatred of wickedness, it came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place, and magnify the temple with their best gifts, insomuch that Seleucus, king of Asia, of his own revenues bore all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifices. But one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. And when he could not overcome Onias, he got him to Apollonius, the son of Thrasias, who then was governor of Coele-Syria and Phoenice, and told him that the treasury in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring all into the king's hand. Now when Apollonius came to the king, and had shown him of the money whereof he was told, the king chose out Heliodorus his treasurer, and sent him with a commandment to bring him the foresaid money. So forthwith Heliodorus took his journey under a color of visiting the cities of Coele-Syria and Phoenice, but indeed to fulfill the king's purpose. And when he was come to Jerusalem, and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, he told him what intelligence was given of the money, and declared wherefore he came, and asked if these things were so indeed. Then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children, and that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed, the sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver, and 200 of gold. And it was altogether impossible that such wrong should be done unto them that had committed it to the holiness of the place, and to the majesty and inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored over all the world. But Heliodorus, because of the king's commandment given him, said, that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasury. So at the day which he appointed, he entered in to order this matter, wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city. But the priests, prostrating themselves before the altar in their priests' vestments, called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. Then whoso had looked the high priest in the face, it would have wounded his heart, for his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind. For the man was so compassed with fear and horror of the body, that it was manifest to them that looked upon him what sorrow he had now in his heart. Others ran flocking out of their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt. And the women, girt with sackcloth under their breasts, abounded in the streets, and the virgins that were kept in ran, some to the gates, and some to the walls, and others looked out of the windows, and all, holding their hands towards heaven, made supplication. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priest, being in such agony. They then called upon the Almighty Lord to keep the things committed of trust safe and sure for those that had committed them. Nevertheless, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. Now as he was there present himself with his guard about the treasury, the Lord of spirits and the Prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of God, and fainted, and were sore afraid. For there appeared unto them a horse, with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering, and he ran fiercely and smote at Heliodorus with his forefeet, and it seemed that he that sat upon the horse had complete harness of gold. Moreover, the two young men appeared before him, notable in strength, excellent in beauty, and comely in apparel, who stood by him on either side, and scourged him continually, and gave him many sore stripes. And Heliodorus fell suddenly unto the ground, and was compassed with great darkness. But they that were with him took him up, and put him into a litter. Thus him that lately came with a great train, and with all his guard into the said treasury, they carried out, being unable to help himself with his weapons, and manifestly they acknowledged the power of God. For he by the hand of God was cast down, and lay speechless without all hope of life. But they praised the Lord, that had miraculously honored his own place. For the temple, which a little afore was full of fear and trouble, when the Almighty Lord appeared, was filled with joy and gladness. Then straightway certain of Heliodorus' friends prayed Onias that he would call upon the Most High to grant him his life, who lay ready to give up the ghost. So the high priest, suspecting lest the king should misconceive that some treachery had been done to Heliodorus by the Jews, offered a sacrifice for the health of the man. Now as the high priest was making an atonement, the same young men in the same clothing appeared and stood beside Heliodorus, saying, Give Onias the high priest great thanks, insomuch as for his sake the Lord hath granted thee life. And seeing that thou hast been scourged from heaven, declare unto all men the mighty power of God. And when they had spoken these words, they appeared no more. So Heliodorus, after he had offered sacrifice unto the Lord, and made great vows unto him that had saved his life, and saluted Onias, returned with his host to the king. Then testified he to all men the works of the great God, which he had seen with his eyes. And when the king asked Heliodorus, who might be a fit man to be sent yet once again to Jerusalem, he said, If thou hast any enemy or traitor, send him thither, and thou shalt receive him well scourged, if he escape with his life. For in that place, no doubt, there is an especial power of God. For he that dwelleth in heaven hath his eye on that place, and defendeth it, and he beateth and destroyeth them that come to hurt it. And the things concerning Heliodorus, and the keeping of the treasury, fell out on this sort. Chapter 4. This Simon, now of whom we spoke afore, having been a bearer of the money and of his country, slandered Onias, as if he had terrified Heliodorus, and been the worker of these evils. Thus he was bold to call him a traitor, that had deserved well of the city, and tendered his own nation, and was so zealous of the laws. But when their hatred went so far, that by one of Simon's faction murders were committed, Onias, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Apollonius, as being the governor of Coele-Syria and Phoenice, did rage, and increase Simon's malice, he went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. For he saw that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet, and Simon leave his folly, unless the king did look thereunto. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason the brother of Onias labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise, and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians. Which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to the Greekish fashion. And the royal privilege is granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John the father of Eupolemus, who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid, he took away, and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashions and increase of heathenish manners through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch and no high priest, that the priests had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowance in the place of exercise, after the game of discus called them forth, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all, by reason whereof sore calamity came upon them. For they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of God, but the time following shall declare these things. Now when the game that was used every 5th year was kept at Tyrus, the king being present, this ungracious Jason sent special messengers from Jerusalem, who were Antiochians, to carry 300 drachms of silver to the sacrifice of Hercules, which even the bearers thereof thought fit not to bestow upon the sacrifice, because it was not convenient, but to be reserved for other charges. This money then, in regard of the sender, was appointed to Hercules' sacrifice, but because of the bearers thereof, it was employed to the making of galleys. Now when Apollonius the son of Menesthius was sent unto Egypt for the coronation of King Ptolemy Philometor, Antiochus, understanding him not to be well affected to his affairs, provided for his own safety. Whereupon he came to Joppa, and from thence to Jerusalem, where he was honorably received of Jason and of the city, and was brought in with torchlight, and with great shoutings, and so afterward went with his host unto Phoenice. 3 years afterward Jason sent Menelaus, the foresaid Simon's brother, to bear the money unto the king, and to put him in mind of certain necessary matters. But he, being brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jason by 300 talents of silver. So he came with the king's mandate, bringing nothing worthy the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant, and the rage of a savage beast. Then Jason, who had undermined his own brother being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of the Ammonites. So Menelaus got the principality, but as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sostratus, the ruler of the castle, required it. For unto him appertained the gathering of the customs, wherefore they were both called before the king. Now Menelaus left his brother Lysimachus in his stead in the priesthood, and Sostratus left Crates, who was governor over the Cyprians. While those things were enduing, they of Tarsus and Malus made insurrection, because they were given to the king's concubine, called Antiochus. Then came the king in all haste to appease matters, leaving Andronicus a man in authority for his deputy. Now Menelaus, supposing that he had gotten a convenient time, stole certain vessels of gold out of the temple, and gave some of them to Andronicus, and some he sold into Tyrus and the cities round about. Which when Onias knew of a surety, he reproved him, and withdrew himself into a sanctuary at Daphne that lieth by Antiochia. Wherefore Menelaus, taking Andronicus apart, prayed him to get Onias into his hands, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Onias in deceit, gave him his right hand with oaths, and though he were suspected by him, yet persuaded he him to come forth of the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up without regard of justice. For the which cause not only the Jews, but many also of other nations took great indignation, and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man. And when the king was come again from the places about Sicilia, the Jews that were in the city and certain of the Greeks that abhorred the fact also complained because Onias was slain without cause. Therefore Antiochus was heartily sorry, and moved to pity, and wept, because of the sober and modest behavior of him that was dead. And being kindled with anger, forthwith he took away Andronicus's purple, and rent off his clothes, and leading him through the whole city unto that very place where he had committed impiety against Onias, there slew he the cursed murderer. Thus the Lord rewarded him his punishment as he had deserved. Now when many sacrileges had been committed in the city by Lysimachus with the consent of Menelaus, and the bruit thereof was spread abroad, the multitude gathered themselves together against Lysimachus, many vessels of gold being already carried away. Whereupon the common people rising and being filled with rage, Lysimachus armed about 3,000 men, and began to first offer violence, one Orinus being the leader, a man far gone in years and no less in folly. They then, seeing the attempt of Lysimachus, some of them caught stones, some clubs, others taking handfuls of dust that was next at hand, cast them all together upon Lysimachus, and those that set upon them. Thus many of them they wounded, and some they struck to the ground, and all of them they forced to flee. But as for the church robber himself, him they killed beside the treasury. Of these matters, therefore, there was an accusation laid against Menelaus. Now when the king came to Tyrus, 3 men that were sent from the Senate pleaded the cause before him. But Menelaus, being now convicted, promised Ptolemy the son of Dorymenes to give him much money if he would pacify the king towards him. Whereupon Ptolemy, taking the king aside into a certain gallery, as it were to take the air, brought him to be of another mind, insomuch that he discharged Menelaus from the accusations, who notwithstanding was cause of all the mischief. And those poor men, who if they had told their cause, yea, before the Scythians, should have been judged innocent, them he condemned to death. Thus they that followed the matter for the city, and for the people, and for the holy vessels did soon suffer unjust punishment. Wherefore even they of Tyrus, moved with hatred of that wicked deed, caused them to be honorably buried. And so through the covetousness of them that were in power, Menelaus remained still in authority, increasing in malice, and being a great traitor to the citizens. Chapter 5.
Matthew chapter 25. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins, who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!" Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." Again,
girl.